By the time age 65 rolls around, only 1 in 100 people will actually be well off financially. That's a shocking number. Even more disturbing? According to studies, 70% of wealthy families lose their wealth by the second generation, and by the time you get to the third generation, over 90% of families have lost it all. Think about that. So even if you do manage to build a fortune in what many call the most abundant time in human history, the odds are stacked against you. Statistically, either you or your kids or your grandkids will somehow manage to screw it up. But that doesn't have to be your story. By the end of this video, not only will you understand what it really takes to build generational wealth, but you'll also have a practical game plan you can pass on to your kids and even your grandkids. Buckle up. This isn't just theory. This is strategy you can apply. And if you're serious about creating a legacy that lasts, you might want to grab a notebook and take some notes along the way. Welcome to WealthWise, the place where future millionaires and billionaires come to get smarter, richer, and wiser. Let's get into it. Way 1. Buy land. To understand generational wealth, you first need to understand the difference between personal wealth and family wealth. Personal wealth is liquid. It's the cash sitting in your account. You can spend it today, blow it tomorrow. Family wealth, on the other hand, is usually illiquid. It's tied up in assets, land, property, businesses. It takes effort to convert it back into cash, which means you're far less likely to waste it on trivial purchases. And that's where land comes in. Land is the ultimate store of value. There's a fixed amount of it on Earth, and demand only goes in one direction, up. Populations grow, cities expand, infrastructure develops, and every new skyscraper, factory, or neighborhood sits on land someone owns. Here's why buying land is generational. Your children can inherit it, and as long as they hold it, the value will rise. It doesn't deteriorate, it doesn't go out of fashion. And unlike your car, your phone, or even some businesses, land doesn't lose relevance. Think about the families in your city who bought farmland 50 or 100 years ago. Back then, it may have seemed useless. Today, that same land might be worth millions because the city grew around it. A practical example? In India, the families who bought land on the outskirts of Delhi or Bangalore 40 years ago, when it was nothing but fields, are now sitting on fortunes because of urban sprawl. Similar stories exist in the US, China, and Europe. And here's a key lesson. You don't always have to sell land to access money. We'll talk about that in Way 5. For now, just remember, if you want your children to inherit something truly valuable, buy land and teach them never to sell it. If you could buy one plot of land today, where would you choose? A growing city suburb, farmland, or commercial land? Drop your answer in the comments. I'd love to see where the WealthWise community is placing its bets. Way 2. Buy cash-flowing property. Now let's go a step further. Land is valuable, but cash-flowing property is where wealth starts to feed itself. We're talking about rental apartments, commercial real estate, or even hotels. The kind of property that not only appreciates in value, but also puts money in your pocket every month. Think of it like playing Monopoly. You don't win by holding empty lots forever. You win when you put houses and hotels on them and start collecting rent. Here's a simple generational wealth recipe. In your lifetime, aim to buy at least 2 cash-flowing rental properties. They don't need to be luxurious skyscrapers. Even modest apartments in growing areas can generate steady rent. Teach your children to do the same. Each generation doubles down, and in 2 or 3 generations, your family has a portfolio of passive income properties. Now, let's make it real. Imagine you own 2 small apartments. Each brings in $800 a month. That's $1,600 in rent. It won't make you a billionaire, but it ensures your family never goes hungry. Now, if your children also buy 2 apartments each, and their children do the same, suddenly, within 50 to 60 years, your family could own dozens of rental properties, creating unstoppable passive income. The truth is, people will always need homes. Businesses will always need shops and offices. Travelers will always need hotels. Cash-flowing property is about creating stability. Would you rather inherit one luxury villa or 3 small apartments that pay rent forever? Comment below, because your answer says a lot about how you think about wealth. Way 3. Build an evergreen business. Most businesses don't last. They make money for a while, then die when trends shift. But an evergreen business? That's different. It survives across decades, even centuries. Look around at the brands you know: Hilton, Ford, Ferrari, Disney, Kellogg's, Gucci, Chanel, Rolls-Royce. What do they have in common? They were started by families. The founders didn't just build a business, they built a legacy that carried their last name into history. Here's the principle: build a business that doesn't rely on short-term trends. TikTok fame won't feed your grandkids, but a logistics company, a food brand, a luxury goods empire, a hotel chain? Those are timeless. Case in point, William Boeing started Boeing in 1916. Today, it's still one of the largest aerospace companies in the world. The business far outlived the man. So ask yourself, what business could carry your last name into the future? What industry can you innovate in that your children can inherit and expand? Now, does this mean every family member has to run the business? But the business should be structured to outlive you, whether through professional managers, family successors, or a foundation. If your last name became a brand, what would it sell? Comment below. I'm curious to see your ideas. Way 4. Buy the S&P 500. Not everyone can start the next Ferrari or Boeing, but here's the thing: you don't have to pick the winners to build wealth. You just need to own a slice of them all. That's where the S&P 500 comes in. It's a basket of the 500 strongest companies in the US. When one company weakens, it's replaced with a stronger one. Over the decades, the S&P has quietly been one of the best wealth-building machines on the planet. Example: if you had invested $100,000 into the S&P 500 in 2009, by 2024 it would be worth over $850,000. That's an 8.5 times return in just 15 years, through recessions, crashes, and even a pandemic. And the best part? It doesn't require genius stock picking. Even Warren Buffett, widely regarded as the greatest investor of all time, has admitted that most people, including his own heirs, should just stick to low-cost S&P 500 index funds. The rule here is simple: consistently invest in the S&P 500, hold for decades, reinvest dividends, and let compounding do its magic. Do you believe it's better to own a few high-risk stocks or spread your bets with the S&P 500? Drop your answer in the comments. Let's see how the WealthWise audience invests. Way 5. Buy, borrow, die. Now we get into the true wealth hack of the ultra-rich. 3 words: buy, borrow, die. Here's how it works. Buy assets that appreciate: land, property, businesses, stocks. Borrow against those assets when you need cash instead of selling them. Die, and pass the assets to your heirs, ideally through trusts or legal structures that minimize taxes. Why borrow instead of sell? Because you don't pay taxes on borrowed money. Let's say you own an apartment worth $500,000. Instead of selling it, you borrow $200,000 against it. That loan is tax-free. You can use it to buy more assets, grow your portfolio, and then use rental income to pay off the loan. The rich repeat this cycle endlessly, snowballing wealth without ever triggering massive tax bills. But here's the kicker: when you die, governments want their cut through inheritance tax. In the US, this can be as high as 40%. In the UK, also around 40%. Without planning, your family could lose nearly half your fortune overnight. That's why wealthy families use trusts, insurance policies, and tax planning. They make sure assets are passed efficiently. This is the wealth game the rich play while everyone else stays trapped selling assets, paying taxes, and starting over. Had you heard of buy, borrow, die before this video? Comment yes or no. I want to see how many in the WealthWise community are already familiar with this strategy. Way 6. Buy and hold Bitcoin. Technology reshapes wealth every generation. Roughly every 20 years, there's a revolution. Railroads, electricity, the internet, smartphones. Those who had the vision, or the courage, to place a small bet on the new frontier reaped massive rewards. Today, that frontier is Bitcoin and digital assets. Now, let's be clear. We're not telling you to sell your house and put it all into Bitcoin. That's gambling, not strategy. But here's a perspective. If you can afford it, buying and holding even one Bitcoin for your children could be one of the most asymmetric bets of the century. Why? Because there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. That's it. And right now, there are nearly 60 million millionaires in the world. Do the math. Even if every millionaire wanted just one, there wouldn't be enough. Scarcity is built into the code. Think about it this way. In 2010, 10,000 Bitcoins famously bought 2 pizzas. By 2025, a single Bitcoin trades in the tens of thousands of dollars. What do you think your kids or grandkids will say if you tell them you had the chance to buy one and didn't? Here's the principle. Don't bet your future on it, but don't ignore it either. A small allocation, something you can afford to set aside and forget about, could make the difference between your family being average or extraordinary. If your parents had gifted you one Bitcoin 10 years ago, do you think you would have held on to it or sold it early? Be honest. Drop your answer in the comments. Way 7. Buy and hold gold, silver, and gemstones. Gold may feel old-fashioned. Silver seems boring. Gemstones are often dismissed as jewelry. But these assets have been the backbone of generational wealth for thousands of years. Why? Because they're portable, universally recognized stores of value. A gold bracelet passed from grandmother to granddaughter isn't just decoration, it's liquid wealth. In times of war, crisis, or currency collapse, families pawned or traded jewelry to survive. Now, let's be honest. Gold and silver aren't going to make you rich in the way a booming business or real estate empire will. They don't generate cash flow. They're defensive, not offensive, but they serve a critical role: insurance for your wealth. Picture this. Currencies collapse, inflation runs wild, economies wobble. Throughout history, gold has stepped in as God's money. Even today, central banks hold gold reserves for stability. And gemstones? They carry generational symbolism. Think of royal families and dynasties. Their jewels weren't just for show. They were wealth condensed into objects small enough to hide, transport, and preserve across centuries. If you had to pass down one asset to your grandchildren, a piece of land, a rental property, or a chest of gold coins, which would you choose? Comment below and let's see how the WealthWise community thinks about legacy. Way 8. Buy and hold art and collectibles. Not all wealth is tangible in the traditional sense. Sometimes value lies in what people desire, not just what they need. That's where art and collectibles come in. Think about it. Elvis's guitar is worth millions, even though it's just wood and strings. A Picasso painting sells for more than an office building. Why? Because of intangible value, status, history, cultural meaning. Art has outperformed the stock market in certain decades, and unlike trendy fads, sneakers, NFTs, or limited edition hype drops, true art and cultural collectibles can hold or even grow in value for centuries. This isn't just for billionaires buying Monets at auctions. Families can build collections too, maybe not world-famous masterpieces, but meaningful pieces of cultural or historical significance. A carefully chosen painting, sculpture, or collectible can become a family heirloom that appreciates with time. The key is to avoid chasing hype. Most things lose value, but authentic art, rare items, or culturally significant collectibles tend to grow in demand. If you could own one collectible, a famous painting, a rare sports card, or a classic vintage car, which would you choose? Drop it in the comments. Way 9. Never stop earning and minimize taxes. Here's a harsh truth. Wealth doesn't just come from assets. It comes from earning power. And no matter how rich you get, you should never stop finding ways to create income. Why? Because income is about more than money. It's about purpose, momentum, and adaptability. The wealthy who stop working often lose their edge, and eventually their fortune. But here's the flip side. What you keep matters more than what you earn. Taxes can eat up 20%, 30%, even 40% of your wealth if you don't plan strategically. That's why the rich obsess over tax efficiency. They set up businesses, family offices, trusts. They structure their expenses so that what looks like personal spending is actually legally deductible business activity. They hire world-class accountants because they know a dollar saved in taxes is just as valuable as a dollar earned. Generational wealth isn't just about making money, it's about keeping it, protecting it, and compounding it. Be honest, do you think schools should teach tax strategy and financial literacy as mandatory subjects? Yes or no? Let's start a debate in the comments. Way 10. Perpetually compound wealth and knowledge. Albert Einstein called compound interest the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't pays it. And that's the principle behind this next way. Compounding isn't just about money, it's about knowledge, habits, and even relationships. Each small improvement multiplies over time. Read one book a month, invest 10% of your income, reinforce good habits. Over a decade, the results are staggering. Here's how the rich use it. They reinvest earnings instead of spending them. They move profits from one venture into another opportunity. They build networks where introductions lead to exponential returns. They consume knowledge daily, stacking mental models that help them make better decisions. Imagine this. You invest $10,000 at a 10% annual return. In 30 years, that's not $40,000. It's nearly $175,000, thanks to compounding. Now imagine doing the same with knowledge. Learning, growing, sharing, applying. The returns aren't just financial, they're life-changing. What's one book or podcast that changed how you think about money or success? Share it in the comments. Your recommendation might help someone else in the WealthWise community level up. Way 11. Marry well. This might sound old-fashioned, maybe even uncomfortable, but who you marry is one of the most critical financial decisions you'll ever make. And it's not just about your spouse, it's also about who your kids marry. Divorce without a prenup? That can cut your wealth in half overnight. And if your children inherit wealth but marry poorly, your family fortune can evaporate in one legal battle. That's why historically, wealthy families arranged marriages, not for romance, but for alliances that preserved wealth across generations. Now, let's be clear, we're not saying marry for money, but you should marry someone who shares your values around money, discipline, and building a future. A partner who spends recklessly, doesn't understand responsibility, or refuses to plan financially can undo decades of hard work. And for your kids? Encourage them to think carefully about marriage. Wealth can either double when two strong families unite, or it can disappear when it's pulled into messy situations. Do you believe financial compatibility is as important as emotional compatibility in marriage? Comment below. Let's hear your perspective. Way 12. Mentor your kids. Here's the truth. If your kids don't start life at least one step ahead of where you started, you failed somewhere along the way. Generational wealth isn't just about money. It's about mentorship, values, and education. Too many families hand their kids the keys to a business or a fortune without teaching them how to handle it. The result? They blow it. If you want your children to continue your legacy, you need to mentor them from the beginning. Teach them how money works. Teach them discipline, work ethic, and resilience. Show them what it means to build, manage, and grow. History proves this. Only 30% of family businesses survive into the second generation. Why? Because the children weren't prepared. They didn't have the hunger, the skill set, or the mentorship to carry the torch. But the opposite is also true. Families that invest in mentoring their children and grandchildren often see their wealth grow exponentially. Think about dynasties like the Rothschilds or the Rockefellers. Wealth was only one part of the legacy. Education, mindset, and mentorship were the other. If you could teach your kids only one money lesson, just one, what would it be? Comment below and let's see what wisdom the WealthWise community would pass on. Way 13. Set up a trust. Money left unprotected is money at risk. That's why the wealthy use trusts, legal structures that hold wealth, protect it, and distribute it according to rules you set. A trust ensures that your kids don't blow through their inheritance in a few years. It can release money only when certain conditions are met. Graduating from college, starting a business, getting married, or reaching a certain age. It can also protect wealth from excessive taxation, creditors, or even divorces. Think of a trust as a financial seatbelt. You spent your life building wealth. Why leave it exposed to chance? A trust makes sure your legacy continues the way you want, even long after you're gone. Would you prefer to give your kids full access to your wealth at once, or release it gradually through a structure like a trust? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Way 14. The 4% rule. Now let's talk about one of the hidden rules the rich live by, the 4% rule. It works like this. If your wealth grows at an average of 6 to 10% per year, you should only withdraw around 4% annually. That way, you're living off part of the returns while the rest keeps compounding. For example, say you have $1 million invested. At 10% growth, that's $100,000 a year. Instead of spending it all, you take $40,000 and reinvest the rest. Over time, your wealth snowballs. Follow this rule and you'll never run out of money. This is how wealthy families stay wealthy. They don't eat the fruit and chop down the tree. They only pick enough fruit to live while letting the tree keep growing. Be honest. Do you think you'd have the discipline to live by the 4% rule if you had millions in the bank? Comment below. I'm curious how many in our community could resist the temptation. Way 15. Write a will. Here's the hard truth. Life has a 100% mortality rate. You will die. The question is, what happens to your wealth when you do? Without a will, chaos takes over. Families fight. Courts get involved. Wealth leaks out through taxes, disputes, and poor decisions. But with a clear, detailed will, you control where your money goes, who benefits, and how it's used. And remember this, by the time you pass away, your children will likely be in their 50s or 60s. They'll already have lives of their own. Your will, in many cases, is not really for them. It's for your grandchildren. It's about creating continuity, not just inheritance. A will makes sure your wealth strengthens your family, not divides it. And it ensures your legacy lives on with intention. Do you already have a will in place, or are you still putting it off? Comment yes or not yet below, and let's see how prepared our community really is. Bonus: children, wealth, and legacy. Here's where it all comes together. Ideally, you want your kids to have enough money to do enough, but not so much that they do nothing at all. That's the fine balance of generational wealth. If you hand over too much without guidance, you create entitled, unmotivated heirs. We've all seen it. Trust fund kids who live in the shadow of their parents, never achieving, never fulfilled. That's not legacy. That's a curse. But if you mentor your children, set up structures, and balance responsibility with opportunity, your wealth becomes a springboard, not a crutch. The world's wealthiest dynasties know this. Some even hold family retreats, bringing children and grandchildren together to align on vision, values, and long-term strategy. That's why certain families have stayed wealthy for centuries, while others disappear in a generation. So here's the WealthWise challenge. If your efforts today will ripple forward into your children's and grandchildren's lives, what word will define your legacy? For us, the word is legacy. If you've made it this far into the video, write legacy in the comments. Let's see how many of you are serious about building something that lasts. And remember, generational wealth isn't just about money. It's about values, vision, and discipline. Money fades without the wisdom to preserve it. At WealthWise, our mission is to give you that wisdom. So if this video has inspired you, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, not just for yourself, but for the generations that will follow in your footsteps.